Yeah, well, I'd like to tell all those people out there in television land that they should pay attention to what's going on with Werner Brock. They've been mutilating his cows and trying to make him out as a crazy person. And he did a lot of, we got 5 DVDs from Werner on different stuff where he's been investigating the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the corruption of the politicians, and they've really tried to attack Werner. Twice they put him in the nut house trying to say he was crazy because he was fighting the system. But I've talked with Werner on very many occasions, and he's quite a sane man, and he's quite a fighter for people's rights. And I think more people should support Werner on his fight to get justice on. They have killed 300 of his cows trying to discourage him, drive him off, and keep him from doing what he does. You will see what he does on these 5 videos. There's 5 of them that we're going to run. And I don't know what else to say other because the videos themselves speak for themselves. And I've talked with Werner a lot on the telephone, and we've done other shows with Werner. And Werner needs a lot of support because he's fighting a battle for all of us against the system. And I would suggest that whatever you can do, if you go on the internet and type in Werner Brock, you probably could get in touch with him, and if he needs support, you could call him or email him and talk to him and support him however you can.
Good afternoon. My name is Werner Brock, and I was born in 1942 over in Germany, exactly in Lower Saxonia, southern tip of Lower Saxonia, about 50 miles south of Hanover, and the town is Nordheim. My parents were farmers at the outskirts of the town, and my educational background is 8 years basic school, 2 years business college, and 2 years agriculture college. I decided to become a farmer because I figured there were lots of people starving in the world. There still was a place for farmers. Against the advice of my dad, who told me, "You're crazy that you want to farm." But anyway, when after I finished business college, last 3/4 of a year, my brother had left the farm, so I had to finish my business college and do the farm work, you know, keep the farm going. After finishing business college, I did full-time farming, and I bought a farm that was basically on the brink of bankruptcy. I brought it back into production, got the field into good shape again, and got the dairy herd producing at acceptable levels. And so for about 10 years I was farming over there. But I didn't see any future there because most of the land was being farmed on a lease base, and whenever the owners decided they could make more money with selling the land for building lots, I would lose a piece of ground where I'd put a lot of work in, and I could foresee already the end where there wasn't any more farmland, enough farmland around to go around among us farmers around the town. So in 1968, I became aware that New Brunswick was actively looking for European farmers to come to New Brunswick and take over where the local farmers had left off. And the provincial government didn't want those huge tracts of what we consider to be decent farmland to be lost and going up in orders and reverting back to forest land. So in early 1969, I came over here. I bought with the Farm Credit Corporation a farm. Well, it was a good sized farm, a little bit over 300 acres cleared land, and a little bit 330 acres woodland. And the farm had been basically cleaned out by the previous lessee or owner, and he stuck the government with no payments for 8 years, stripped the farm, no property taxes paid, and it had become an embarrassment for the Farm Credit Corporation. So they approached me if I was willing to buy the farm, and I did it, and I put my nose to the grindstone. I had something to look forward to, and after 5 years, when I thought I had myself well established. That's when some local jokers figured I wasn't supposed to be there. And that's when the hate crimes really started out. My farm is located just outside Petitcodiac. It's a village in southern New Brunswick, about halfway located between Sussex and Moncton. I had to go on a steep learning curve, and people wanted to tell me, local people that didn't farm at all, they wanted to tell me how to farm and so, but after a while I found out that, you know, the general rules apply about you look after the soil and after the land, and the land will look after you. Basically, brainwashing didn't work with me. I always checked and back-checked. This wasn't what some people wanted to see. They wanted to boss me around. And I didn't come into another country to be bossed around. But anyway, I tried to be a good neighbor, was helpful to my neighbors. Whenever they needed help, I would help them. And the first few years, I still got a sense of the way Maritimers used to work together. But then in the mid-70s, when my trouble started out, a bad crowd moved in. And they figured they could throw their weight around and bully everybody. And if they wanted your place, you had to just step aside and let them have it, you know. And I don't think that that should be the way in a country that calls itself a bastion of freedom and a free country. Good afternoon, to whom it may concern, and I think it should be of concern to everybody, about the misuse of directional energy devices. My animals and I have been at the receiving end now for the last 35 years. 41 years ago I came over from the old country to continue farming here in New Brunswick in eastern Canada. And I thought I had found the perfect country when I came here. But within 5 years some strange things occurred. And I wasn't completely out from the backwoods, and I had a certain amount of knowledge about the sciences, physics, chemistry, and so on. And I had attended agriculture college, and I had been raising over in the old country livestock and milking cows. And in 1975, suddenly animals would rapidly lose weight, sometimes up to 300-400 pounds in a couple of days, and the symptoms were clearly symptoms of poisoning, like they had got something real corrosive inside, and this was covered up by the veterinarians. But anyway, that was the background. And then it was covered up by the RCMP, and they made a few wrong turns, basically where they compromised their positions in their departments that would have opened them up to criminal prosecution. And ever since, my life here in New Brunswick has been a nightmare. About 15 years ago I went back into livestock, and the killing of my animals continued. In the meantime there were many other acts of sabotage, but they concerned mostly field crops and my farming operations, equipment and so. But I just want to cut it short. Today we want to deal with what happened to the animals. Here's the first heading. It's shallow burns. When you notice the first picture is a limo cross cow, and you noticed the 2 burns in the nostrils, like somebody had buttered out a cigarette. The next one is the next few pictures are of 3 calves that have that occurred overnight. Perfectly round burns where the hair was singed off. Now, with what I will show later on, at the time, mad cow disease was a threat to the livestock industry. We didn't have any mad cow disease here in eastern Canada. But I reasoned, when they focused this energy that burns their hair off on their forehead, and at times it went deeper into the tissue, basically when they cooked their brain, then those animals will display symptoms of mad cow disease, of brain damage. Well, anyway, the picture number 4 is a calf that had been gassed, and then they focus the energy on its front leg, and you see the hair peeled all off and the skin peeled all off, and it got lame. There's a second picture of that animal. Then another picture, it had a burn on the hind quarter. Always consistent, the same size burns, where I had seen from the house next door, that's built right there within the pasture. There used to be an old schoolhouse. And where I had seen a deep red intensive light beam, about 1.5 inches in diameter, that matched the size of those burns on those animals. A deep red light beam coming out of the front door of the house, beaming at the cattle that were resting on the side hill, and subsequently cows had holes cooked right into the udders, 1.5 inches in diameter and up to 2-3 inches deep, which caused the death within a week of 5 cows. They died within a week. I got several more animals there that have survived it, and the scar tissue and the ruined udders still can be seen. Now the next picture is a red white-faced limo-cross calf with a burn right on the nose. And those burns, those energy beams directed to the nose, you will see further documentation. I directly contribute to the death of at least 250 head of cattle. You will see it later on. We call it a death beam. Then you see a picture of my kitty. About 3 months ago I was coming out and her hair was singed off in circles. She survived it, she's still living, but she is just about as thin as she can be. Now, what kind of sick freaks do something like that to animals? But this is just only a fraction. Then you see the brown calf, overnight, next morning, bleached out spot on the noses. This is contributed to the frequency that's being used, what I call a death beam. Now, most of the animals got killed by what I call a death ray, where the atmospheric air is being manipulated with a directional energy beam focused on the nose of the animals, and where the oxygen is being changed into ozone and the nitrogen is being oxidized. So the animals are breathing in this manipulated bubble of air, which is made up out of high concentrations of ozone and nitrogen oxides. Ozone, when combines with the moisture of the respiratory tract and the mucous membrane, it forms peroxide, which is clearly shown at the bottom, where you see that picture of the lung that had turned completely white with hemorrhaging around. Peroxide, it bleaches and it's corrosive. And those circles on the noses appeared, picture 1 and 2, overnight. The other picture shows a brown cow with her mouth open. Another way what they were doing, they were focusing the beam onto the open mouth, and where there was more the oxidization of nitrogen is through heat producing frequency. Externally it would cause burns, like cigarette burns, like when we first started out, where I showed the burns on the nose of the animals. Here they focus it on the tongue. Oxidization of nitrogen forms nitric acid, is salty, so the cows keep licking and licking and licking. And they get this corrosive mixture inside, in the lungs, digestive tract, urinary tract, and it does massive damage. Those animals, they rapidly will thin down, as you see on this cow, and become unthrifty the next. And where this frequency is being used, those spots where the frequency had been focused on, they pigment and they take regardless of the pigmentation of the animals, they take on a black pigmentation. Now the next one, same picture, heat producing frequency, oxidization of nitrogen being focused on the nose of the animals. Sometimes I would come in the yard and the cattle were standing at the gate and they had a brownish, reddish brown liquid on the nose and they kept licking. Now, nitric acid is a reddish brown liquid and it's salty. Energy being focused on the nose, pigments. Where those burns were, it pigments black pigmentation. Same way as what happened where the holes were burnt into the tits, black pigmentation. And you see this animal by nature, it does not have black pigmentation. And before that incident, it didn't have any black spots on the noses. But on the arrangement of pictures down at the bottom, where they are grouped in 6, I've documented it there, the black pigmentation. Now, this is externally, but what it does internally to the animals. The next one is a picture of the lung. Massive hematoma. The next lung. Bleaching out on the inside, on the outside of the lung, caused by peroxide. It seeps right through the tissue and causes massive corrosive damage to the internal organ. Corrodes the blood vessels from the inside, especially nitric acid, and causes massive internal bleeding in the internal organs, as what is documented, plus massive corrosive damage to the inside lining of the stomach of the rumen. That's what the next picture shows. But one sign that the animals or the calves had been gassed normally was when I was coming out in the morning and the animals were down, that were completely healthy the night before. The mouth is white as snow, tissue goes in shock, and ice cold. They either die outright of shock or they recover temporarily. The mouse turns warm again after about a couple hours, but then there is the internal damage to which they succumb most of the time in the next 2 or 3 days, sometimes within the next 7 hours. Now, where this energy had been focused, what happens to the vegetation in those areas when it had been focused on the vegetation? Then there are circles in the grass where the grass turns purple. Oh yeah, I forgot. There you see, to the left, you see a lung. This cow got gassed she was in an excellent shape, fairly aggressive cow. I had to watch myself when I walked through the herd that I didn't startle her or she would come right after me. You know, she was very protective of her calf and so on. A month earlier she had been gassed. She became very docile, lost rapid weight. And then a month later, she got gassed the second time, and she wouldn't get up anymore. So I had to put her down, and within half an hour, I opened up. And as you see on the lung, you see already the brown coloration of the lung, where basically the tissue had died off from having been gassed a month earlier. Now, I got ahead of myself. Next thing, where this energy had been focused on the vegetation, the next day, purple coloration. Months later, excessive amount of nitrogen there. In the pasture, where the animals had been gassed, within an hour, when they urinate, the urine is so corrosive, it burns the grass off right away. And generally for 3 to 4 months, no grass will grow in that spot anymore. Next one, you see a calf, all bloody on the hind end, and the skin peeling off and everything. You imagine the damage that had been done to that poor little animal inside. But this one was lucky, it survived, and it healed up again. Most of them, wherever this corrosive material concentrates, if it concentrates in certain parts of the bowel or certain parts of the stomach or in the esophagus, it corrodes the hole right through, and the animal is dead within hours. This calf here was fine the night before. It was a few days old, and as you see, beautiful cow, lots of milk. I was coming out in the morning. The rest of the cows, they had retired towards the edge of the woods. They were standing underneath the trees. This calf stayed behind. And I had already a bad feeling when I saw that. When I was coming out in the morning and I saw that calf there. So I chased it up, and it had a few times it stumbled, but then it joined the mother. At noontime, that little fellow was dead. Now, I opened it up immediately. You see the hemorrhaging on the heart, and you see the hematoma of the lung. Lived about another, what? From being gassed 7 hours, you know, and then you see the picture of one of the heart with massive hematoma, massive hemorrhaging. Then the next picture is the inside of the stomach. That's stripped right out. Then you see a picture of the little calf of the liver. And again, the lungs. Peroxide, ozone exposure, and nitrogen dioxide exposure. Now, about a month later, in that spot where I found the little calf, a patch of thistles came up, and every blossom was white. That indicated the presence of a strong sterilizing chemical that had dissipated into the soil. Normally thistles are pink, and this is what I've observed time and time again. The next picture, you see where you see my hand over a large sawtooth aspen or purple leaf. The residual nitrogen causes in some species excessive giant growth. I've seen leaves where this energy had been focused that are normally about 2 inches wide, grown up to 14 inches wide. Now the next picture you see a cow that had survived this modified atmospheric air, the death beam. Those where that had been focused on the nose, later on those spots, they pigment, and that frequency or the combination of frequencies takes on the tissue later on, takes on the natural pigmentation of the animal. As this stuff moves through the body, it permeates through the tissue, big patches of hair fall right off, causes in some instances arthritis, as you see on the next picture, the little calf, but good pasture, lots of sunshine, it pulled out of it, it healed up again. Now the next picture, you see a lung of a cow that had been killed. The cow lived for about another week, and Andy Sangange tells me again, the district veterinarian, that's a normal picture of a lung. Well, I don't know what he calls normal. The next one is a picture of a heart, massive hemorrhaging, same animal. According to the veterinarian, that's normal. Those autopsies were done within a couple hours, some of them within half an hour after the animals had passed away. Again here, next picture of a lung, massive hematoma. Sometimes when I opened up the animals, it had this corrosive mixture. It leaked right out of the lungs into the chest cavity, and it looked like somebody had poured Javex in. And the consistency of the diaphragm was like the consistency of a wet paper towel. It ripped right to pieces. Again, another picture of the heart. And the next picture, inside lining of the rumen. This animal lived for another, it was a little calf, it lived for another 2 days. And you see where the bleeding was and the hemorrhaging, those spots had turned brown. But it hung on for about 2 days. And then it passed away after it had been gassed. Now, here is an assortment of pictures. First picture shows the brown cow that had been mutilated when she was a little calf. Wasn't enough. When she became a cow, they had to burn a hole right into her udder. The next picture shows a kidney in the urinary tract, turned black. That animal lived for about another 4 days. Then a lung of the same animal, bleaching of the lung, and then massive hemorrhaging set in. Then another sick way of doing harm to the animal was 5 times on a weekend, Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon. Every time 2 animals simultaneously abort their calves, full-grown calves, within 2 or 3 hours. As you see on that white cow, energy being focused inside, whatever frequency is being used causes immediately labor, and the cows abort their calves. There, the next calf, I had a kind of a hard time taking the picture. It just had been exposed to that energy beam on its nose, and I took with an old Polaroid camera, I took that picture there. But I got many more pictures where I showed the bleaching, perfectly bleached out spots on the noses. Most of the time they were about 5/8 of an inch in diameter, happening overnight or within hours. Or I would come in at night, in the morning in the barn, and at the time I had them in a free-stall barn, where each cow had their individual stall where they would go in, and cows' blood would be gushing out of their noses. And then they kept working for the next few nights, they kept working at the animals, and by the end of the week, those animals were dead. There again is Brownie, and you can see again on the hind end, the hole in the hip. Now, top left picture, that's when I became aware that they used a directional energy beam. I was coming out one morning, below the road in the pasture, 2 cows, brown cows, had a bleached out spot on the side. And I reasoned, what bleaches? Peroxide. How do you get peroxide? UV type energy beam changes oxygen into ozone during the night with perspiration, moisture on the hair. Peroxide combines with moisture. No, ozone combines with moisture, forms peroxide. Peroxide bleaches. It's a no-brainer. This is about the pigmentation I was talking about, where the energy beam had been focused on the noses of the animals, and they were exposed to high levels of ozone and nitrogen oxides. Could be nitrogen dioxide or whatever, but anyway, which formed peroxide and nitric acid. Most of the time after that happened to the animals, then within a few days, if they didn't die immediately, they become unthrifty, lose rapid weight. And when they survive, then those spots turn pigmented. And here again you see one of the calves that had been exposed to it, and clear mucus and water coming out of the hind end. That little fellow survived, and it's so corrosive it burns the hair and the skin right off. About 6 years ago, they had killed 27 animals on me, and I did not know where to turn anymore. So in the morning, I went down to the local church down the road, and most of the indications pointed toward members of the church. We have lots of evidence. So I walked right up to the front of the church, didn't say a word, looked at the congregation, looked at what I considered to be the black sheep, and walked out. One member of the congregation, he came out, and we had a good talk for about 20 minutes outside. In the afternoon, I placed the float with 27 dead animals right beside the road. It was a nice sunny afternoon, early spring, lots of traffic going by, and when people stopped, I would walk over and tell them what's going on in New Brunswick, and that nobody gives a damn anymore. No government is doing its job, and you imagine how many people would have spoken out if they would have seen the dead bodies in the concentration camps. And unless people start waking up, I don't have much hope. The next picture, you see one of those burns. The next picture was Simi. She had been killed last winter. But anyway, this was several winters early. I was coming out in the morning in the winter, and half of her nose was burnt off. Quarter of an inch deep did she burn. It was such a shock to that poor animal. She aborted her calf in the 7th month. The dead calf was laying right behind her, about 7 months. So this, for the time being, I have many more pictures and documentations. I can go more into the science, but I leave it up to you. Just Google in ozone toxicity, and there's been lots of research being done as far back as 1944, but extensive research had been done in the 70s in the United States as well as here in Canada. But this doesn't seem to have filtered down to the expert community, to the science community here in Atlantic Canada. They want to be so leading in science and everything, but as far as I can see, how much longer do they want to fool the public and use this as a meal ticket? Because what I've seen, the damage to the animals It was a meal ticket in order to deal with it and try to save the animals. It was a meal ticket for the veterinarians. At least 85% of all vet calls were on account where tried to save the animals. They pumped them full of antibiotics, and 2-3 hours later they were dead anyway. And I wouldn't be surprised what kills animals, what kills mammalian species, that there is a big Watergate about the health problems of the people. I looked around, what happened to my neighbors, cause of death, of early death, and so on, and there are parallels. Now we come to the second heading, and that is deep tissue damage. First picture showed a cow that was in excellent shape. They burned. She turned lame on one side. A year later, she got burned on the other side, and the cow went down. She went and died. Second picture, Brownie. She got gassed when she was a few days old, few-day-old calf. I had to feed her for about a week with a stomach tube. Her mother was an excellent mother. She always would come back and attend to the calf and lick it. And so after about a week, that little calf got back on its feet. The next day, I was walking through and I noticed it had I thought what I perceived to be a piece of shit on the hip. And I kept my animals already well bedded. And so I wanted to pull it off. And a cone of flesh, about 1.5 inches deep and about 1.5 inches diameter, fell right out. And I thought, those bastards, it wasn't enough what they did to that poor animal. They had to take a knife and cut it out there. But then I noticed on the right hand side, it caved in the same way, but it didn't break the skin. That's when I realized that they used a laser set at a certain depth. I still got the cow in the herd. You will see another picture of her later on. Then the next picture is a picture of the first cow where they burned her hip on the right hand side, which basically caused her to go down and she died. Now the next picture is another dastardly act what they were doing. They were burning deep tissue burns that basically ruptured the bag where the intestines and the rumen is in. So they ruptured. This cow lived for about another week. And then she went down and died. And you see the opening there. They had ruptured the bag and ruptured the intestine, and she died of septicemia. This picture was taken within an hour after she died. I cut her right away open, and that was the damage that was being done there. And it wasn't enough. That cow had a full-grown calf in. Then the next picture, you see the red cow. That's where they beamed a beam in there and caused a small rupture. Then the next picture, that happened about 4.5 weeks ago. The cow lived for about another 5 or 6 days, and I had to put her down. A beautiful cow, same ruptured. Then the brown cow, she had the big swelling underneath the belly, but then I noticed the burn on the udder. And it became more prolific. And I thought she was ruptured too, but it wasn't, the guts hadn't popped out of the bag. It just was a swelling. The swelling went away, but I took photos about a circular burn about 1.5 inches in diameter. And those circular burns, 1.5 inches in diameter, I tracked to the house next door. There used to be an old schoolhouse, and it was torn down there about 25 years ago. And the church down the road, the community, they built a parsonage there. And what I've seen over the last 20 years, there didn't come anything good out of the house, including this deep red intensive light beam, laser type light beam, and subsequently 1.5 inches in diameter, and subsequently the animals had deep tissue burns, 1.5 inches in diameter. What I mentioned before, 5 cows, they swell all up underneath, and within a week they were dead. I got some more animals that show the same, shows the damage. They have survived it, but the front quarter of the udder is ruined. Other cows, they burned a hole in from the back. Whatever a sick mind could figure out to harm the animals, that's what this bunch has been doing. Another way of ruining the cows was they would burn the tits and cause permanent scarring of the tits. A few years ago I had to get rid of one cow. The tits were so badly scarred the milk wouldn't even flow anymore through. Either from cuts right across the tit to holes being burned into. You see here number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, 5, number 6, that cow. On top of that, they burnt a hole right into the backside of the udder, of the right rear end, rear quarter. Then you see the next picture, big circular burn. And another, what they did for a while, they would burn the tips of the tits off, as you see there. Or here, roasted it. And that cow, they did it last year. And where you saw earlier is a grey calf with a circular burn on the back. They gassed it a few times. It wouldn't grow anymore. It didn't grow any bigger than about 350 pounds. And the mother is a Simmental Holstein limo cross. Got about 3/4 limo. Had a beautiful udder. Nice milking cow. Her mother produced the fastest growing calf I've ever seen. It weighed 940 pounds at 11 months of age. No feet, no short feet or anything. This year, just only about a few days ago, they targeted the same cow again. I call her Bossy, young Bossy. About a week ago, they messed around with a calf, but it's still alive. And then, I think the day before yesterday, I noticed she had the similar burns again on her tits overnight. Okay, picture number 1, Bossy. What they were doing for a while there years ago, they would, young animals, growing calves, they would focus the energy beams onto their horns, and then the horns would go completely crooked, as you see, for example, on this one. You know, when the new growing horn, when this energy is being focused on the buds, then it will go crooked. I still have that cow there, and she is the daughter of a Simmental Holstein limo cross, and her mother produced the fastest growing calf I've ever seen. Now the next one, this happened last year in the summer. I think it was on Saturday morning, I was coming out, and this little calf, it was a few days old. A hole was ripped right into the backside of that little calf. This little calf had an excellent background, beautiful milking mother, as you can see on the next picture. And when I looked from the back, I could look right into the guts. We made a YouTube about it, and I call it always on Saturday morning, Friday night, the night of the goons. And the goons sure had been at work again. And you see what sick, dastardly deeds they did to that poor animal. Now the next one, again on Saturday morning, last year by the beginning of May, I was coming out in the morning, and the cattle were staying overnight right across from the house in the side hill, where they were well bedded down, and I was feeding them there. They were sheltered. It was a beautiful, nice morning. And what did I see? I saw Red. I call her Red, that cow. She's mostly limo. And when I found her, her left eyeball was laying on top. An 11-inch long horn was fully rammed into the ground. One hind foot, the claw was partly torn off, and she was heavily bleeding out of the rectum. And naturally, she was dead. We made a YouTube about it, but I didn't put it together that morning. I didn't look at that over the previous years. On several times during the night I had seen a helicopter searchlight, indicated a helicopter within a quarter of a mile of the house. One time at between 1 and 2 o'clock at night, I just saw this searchlight coming out just between two big pine trees there on the ridge, and then it disappeared again, no sound. At another time, around between 9 and 10 o'clock at night, it was dark, I was walking across the yard and I happened to look up, and directly over the farmyard I saw again the distinct downturn searchlight of a helicopter making a real sharp turn, and again no sound. So I started inquiring. I'd heard about that there were some military helicopters where they could cancel out the sound, and it was being reaffirmed to me by a former military pilot who later on became a senator. And as soon as I started communicating it around, talked to reporters and so about it, the next thing I got a notice from YouTube that the YouTube we took that morning documenting this was offensive. And they took it off the net. But it's still posted in another site, but I'm an internet dummy. I have to pay more attention to it. But it's still on the net somewhere else. I have to look it up. And my reason was the only way this animal could have obtained those kind of injuries was when she would have been dropped from a great heights and hit the ground with a bang. It popped the upper eyeball out. And what I figured, they must have been in a hurry, put a cable instead of around the ankle, they put it around the hoof, and it slipped. I've been talking to ranchers in the southwestern United States and other ranchers where they found the animals after the others had been cut off with cauterized cut. The way they found the animals, like they had been dropped from a great height and they hit the ground with a bang. And this was exactly the picture here. Yeah. The next one is my limo bull. That's another sick thing what they did for years. They would blind the animals. I had to go to the sawmill, get some sawdust or bark for bedding. And when I was coming home, an hour and a half later, suddenly I had 4 blind calves. And that went for a period of time. And whatever they could do to disrupt the normal pattern of the animals, little calves and the mothers, they find each other through sight, through smell, and through sound. When you eliminate the sight, that the little calves or the mothers can see the calf, you got them already greatly handicapped. As I say, whatever sick minds could figure out to do harm. And I've had over the years repeated threats, sooner or later we get you out of there, we're going to get you. And the RCMP failed to follow up on it. I gave them as much information as anybody could ever give them. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The RCMP has a vested interest that I just plain fade away. Or they can discredit me. Because then they are off the hook. So are the different government departments, federally and provincially. I've been slandered, false accusations been brought forward against me over the years, over the last 35 years. On 2 occasions, 35 years and 34 years, upon false accusations I was being put twice into the loony bin in order to get me to shut up. But how can anybody shut up about those cruelties? And the ones that are using this technology, what I'm talking about, they have no qualms using it against people, and I have the scars to prove it. And they have caused the deaths. In my estimation, they have caused the early demise and death of some of my neighbors too. But as I say, there's a lot more science to it, and I don't want to go too deep into it right now. But if anybody is interested in, I can give them more links and more information. Okay. Now I come to another heading, I call it energy bullets. At the top you see the hind foot of my second bull. He's half Charolais and half Limousin. I was coming out one morning and his foot was swollen and he had burn marks on his ankle. Over the next week, those burn marks casted over and then they opened up and the pus was run out for several months. He went lame, but then it started, most of it started healing up, but the ankle is still double the size, but he started bleeding again. And last year, by the end of the winter, I was coming out in the morning and guess what? He had a big swelling behind the left front foot and he had a grapefruit size swelling in front. After about a week, I noticed crusted over circular brown spots. Then they opened up and it drained out. The bottom picture, you see there, the bull, and most of the swelling had gone away. But at the same time, I had 3 or 4 calves that had the same type burns on their ankles. And this was always subsequent when in the mornings they had been laying at the back window of the house next door where I had seen the energy beams coming out. But then there's another picture. It shows the outside of the stomach of a cow that had been hit about a week earlier. She lived for another week and then she passed away and I cut her open immediately and that's what I noticed. There was a hole burnt right into the stomach. Poor animal died of septicemia. It was, I called her Curly. When she was born years earlier, I checked 3 times in the winter, in the depth of winter, I checked 3 times at night on the mother. And when the 4th time I went out at 4 o'clock in the morning, the mother had laid the calf right at the back door underneath, and there was a crack of about a couple inches, and it was about 20 below. And when I found the little calf at 4 o'clock in the morning, his feet were already frozen, lower feet were already frozen stiff. So I carried it to the house, put it in the bathtub with warm water and thawed it out again. And I saved it. It became a nice cow and brought me, I don't know, 4 or 5 calves, you know, until they killed her. So, can you imagine, over the last 15 years, now over 300 animals killed. I treat those animals like pets, and I went through a lot of sacrifices in order to save them. And those monsters that are doing that to the animals, they shouldn't be running free. And I figure if they would have done anything like that 100 years ago out west, I think the cowboys would have found, and the ranchers would have found very inventive ways to get them to stop. But they should remember one thing. History has a tendency to repeat itself. And one word to the veterinarians. If the Nazis would have had you kind of experts as witnesses for the defense of the war criminals at the Nuremberg trial, they would have got away with it. Shame on you. Now I want to give you a few background pictures. The first picture, it showed the animals there a year ago. This is how, by the end of the winter, when the weather was mild, I was feeding them in the hillside. And there's always a nice pad of bedding on the ground, so the animals don't have to lay on the cold earth. And when the nights were nasty, they could go in the barn, where they were well bedded down too. Then you see the layout of my farm, nice rolling countryside, and a good part of that I cleared the ground. It was going up in alders and I drained it, put about 5.5 miles of ditches in the place, put tile drain in, limed it and everything. And when it was looking up, then people would say to me, oh, look how much land you got. Years earlier, when I was ditching, and most of it I did with a farm tractor, getting stuck in the mud, they were driving by, tipped on their head, look at this crazy fella, you know. But anyway, last year I posted beside the road a sign. The Premier of New Brunswick, Sean Graham, he spent a few $100,000 for an advertising campaign trying to lure people to New Brunswick and to invest in this province. So I put up this sign right beside the road. New Brunswick, the place to be for mass murderers and environmental criminals in training. Full support from government and RCMP protection guaranteed. Latest technologies and docile subjects readily available. Now there was another issue where the government tried to push uranium mining here in the province, and I had strong objections to it. I said with the tailing piles. Radioactive material gets blown all over the province. And who still wants to eat the food, consume the food that's been produced here? Now, the other angle is, in order to destroy my feed supply for the animals. This I've documented now for over 35 years, and in massive cover-up by the provincial government and the Department of the Environment and the RCMP, even interference in criminal investigation asked for by the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, was the use of post-emergence herbicide, kill off the productive forage plants and replace them with wheat. Hayfields that had a good stand of Timothy clover mixture, within the next year, suddenly, this is what I got out of it. And then I would see mutations in some of the weeds that would come up. Here, for example, goldenrod, cabbagey growth and everything. I have thousands of photos. I've taken those pictures over the last 35 years. Every season, I took the photos to document it. Now, then you see animal rights rally in Moncton at the Wesleyan Church. Our local member, the local member of parliament in Moncton, Brian Murphy, doing some grandstanding, addressing a crowd of 200-300 people about his concern about the welfare of animals. Mr. Murphy had knowledge of the mutilation and killing of my animals for at least 2 years previous. On at least 2 locations, I had dropped off documentation at his office. So I went to the rally and I reminded Mr. Murphy, and he called his assistant Luke Lapointe over and told him to look into it. Nothing happened for nearly 3/4 of a year. Once a month I would phone up. Nobody would pick up the phone, so I finally phoned up at his office in Ottawa. I said, may I talk to Luke Lapointe? He is not here. He is in Moncton. And the lady gave me the number. So I tried to phone in Moncton, to no avail. In the afternoon, I get a phone call from the Kodiak RCMP in Moncton, threatened that they would lay charges against me if I ever contact Brian Murphy's office again. I told them to butt out, that this was none of their business. So much for politicians, and I have lots of politicians, including our present Premier, and the previous Premier, and the Premier before. You know, Bernard Lord and Frank McKenna, they all had knowledge of it, and they didn't do a damn thing about it. So I've tried my own way of drawing public attention to it and get those things to stop. So about a couple of weeks ago, I parked again with 19 dead animals. I parked it beside the road. It was standing there for 4 days until the excavator came and buried those poor souls. In the meantime, another 5 animals have been killed. And I put up signs, 35 years of hate crimes against immigrant farmer, mass murder of over 300 cows and calves, the last 15 years alone, and many more mutilated, which is well documented. Then I put up a sign, New Brunswickers, wake up and help clean up organized crime. The murderers are living among us and are being protected by Canada's finest, the RCMP. And here, not to forget the SPCA. Now, there again you see a layout of the pasture, the cattle in the pasture. Here, then you see pictures of the rural road. And I think my trouble started out when some smart Alex, could have been local junior chamber of commerce, considered I wasn't supposed to be there, and 3.5 miles of road frontage in a nice rural setting, just 25 miles out of Moncton, would be worth a pretty penny. And I've had threats ever since. Sooner or later we get you out of there, we're going to get you. Or the land was granted to our forefathers and their descendants for all times. And I said, how about when they sell it? Belongs to them anyway. Threats after false accusations from an RCMP officer. Officer Reed, we get something on you, we put you to jail, and hopefully the Dutch will put you away for good. There are enough citizens who will testify against you. And I said to him, from what you have pulled off before, I don't have any doubt that you will be able to drum up enough false witnesses to pull that through. And I walked out, filed a complaint against the officer, asked his superior for an apology from the officer. You won't get it. So basically, they got carte blanche to do whatever they want. And that's what they've proven with me over the last 35 years. But I hope that there's still some decent souls in government and among the authorities and the police that finally will not put up with this anymore and start cleaning house. But I hope it isn't just wishful thinking. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the audio, here is a letter from Mr. Alan Graham. He's one in a long line of ministers of agriculture from 1975 on. I don't know how they got the portfolio of becoming Minister of Agriculture. At least they should have a certain amount of experience. But I think now with the new Minister of Agriculture, Mike Olskamp, things don't have changed very much. He might come from the Sackville area, from the marsh. But I don't know if he knows anything about agriculture. But he sure doesn't have the balls to do the right thing. And as I say, we get a new government in. They changed the sign up at the storefront. Flip it over, liberals, conservative. Right now they flipped it over and it's a conservative government, but I don't think that anything will change, and things behind in the business are going on schedule. Here you will see a letter I got in response of contacting our last Premier, Sean Graham. I contacted him on the 6th of July 2006 when he was leader of the provincial opposition, and he was the liberal agriculture critic. I had contacted Mr. Graham first time on the 1st of in 2001, and I got letters to confirm that. So I contacted the same way his father, Alan Graham, when he was Minister of Agriculture in 1989. I went to Fredericton, spoke to him personally, the same way as I spoke to Sean Graham. And in response from Mr. Alan Graham, the Minister of Agriculture, I got a letter promising to look into the matter. Nothing had been done. I was well familiar with it because I have letters from nearly every Minister of Agriculture from 1975 on, starting with Malcolm MacLeod, Agriculture Minister Malcolm MacLeod at the time. And they all stated that they promised to look into it. Now, this has been now a 35-year nightmare for me. All lights are flashing, all bells are ringing, but there doesn't seem to be anybody there in the government who actually do the job they are mandated to do.